beautiful viewers on E360. I heard yesterday I was the coolest grandmother of all. So look what I'm doing. I'm feeding the little one. It's time for his feed. So I'm so excited. I have amazing, beautiful co-host, and I've got beautiful Craig as our spotlight author. Today's guest, Craig Barnsdale, brings a topic to many of us that we shy away in mortality. Before the show, we were talking about it, how amazing this amazing book is. And if you ever not know, how do you want to be, how your funeral want to be? I want dancing. I want flowers. I want the rainbow colors. But I know I told my husband and my children, but I never put it on paper. So my beautiful Craig, your book have changed my thought on everything. So I cannot wait for all of us to start asking questions and for you, my beautiful Craig, to share your wisdom and your brilliance. As this, you are dealing with this for so many years. So may I ask, will you please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Yes. Well, thank you to all of you for having me on your show today. I very much appreciate it. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I started my career as a funeral director when I was quite young. I worked in that role for large and small funeral homes for 13 or 14 years, and I saw working on the front lines of the funeral industry with the many families that I was involved in that the vast majority of situations there was no planning done, and the resulting turmoil for the surviving family members was very intense in many of the situations. But in far fewer of the situations, the deceased had been proactive and talked and planned about what he or she wanted. And the difference was far, far better on the family members.
Beautiful. So, my beautiful Craig, I'm going to give it over to Krista, and then beautiful Gail will then go next, and then Natalie. And then, so Krista, you are welcome to introduce yourself, and I will not be able to show your tagline. So, ladies, please help me with Krista's tagline, and then ask your first question. Thank you, my beautiful one.
Well, thank you so much. I'm also from Ontario, Canada. So that's pretty exciting. Usually we have people from all over the world. And so I'm best known as an earth angel, as I'm brought into people's lives to help them through their journey by showing them how to shift their mindset to live a soul aligned life. And I'm an Amazon #1 best-selling author. The name of my book is called Skip the Pain, Experience the Pleasure. Here's my tagline: cut crap that's holding you back so you can live the life you love. Because really that's what we have to do, is let go of that pain. I'm an international speaker. I'm obviously a TV co-host. I'm a nutritionist by trade. I'm a Reiki master and also an energy worker in many modalities, and do the best I can to heal and spread joy to the world. So, very excited to get into your book. Thank you so much for the honor of having us, part of your journey with this book. And 100% does it resonate with me. So, I have a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to start with the first one. So I loved how in each chapter you seem to outline the steps of how people can maybe fulfill their wishes, have their wishes known, and starting with communicate your funeral wishes. You talked about wills and the different types of wills. I didn't even know there was different types of wills. If do you want a funeral or cremation? What's the plan? And all the estate planning, and what's your legacy? Looking for attorneys and personal directives and all that stuff. So I know you definitely worked, in this field, but why do you feel it was important to put those steps into the book?
Well, my biggest challenge, and what took me a long time, Krista, to really get to the point of writing a manuscript, was trying to figure out how I could best put down on paper what I had experienced in both the funeral industry and then also the financial planning industry, where I saw similar things happen that people just didn't want to talk about these things to a large degree. And I finally figured out that a book was the best way to do it. After trying many things that didn't work, this seemed to be such a great way of doing it. And I surprised myself that I guess I'm a decent writer, and the book is doing quite well.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And like I said, it truly resonates and is something that everybody needs. I will say to the everybody who's watching right now, you need to get this book. So I will hand it over to Natalie.
Mm. Thank you, Krista. Welcome, Greg. Yeah, I've been reading your book, absorbing it, and everybody needs this information. Um, I'm Natalie Chilton. I'm a 3 times author. My story is called Unsilenced: Use Your Voice, Words Hold Power. And I'm a therapist and a truth coach. And I love being on the author spotlight. So I had fun putting some questions together for you, Greg. Let's see. Um, what what this is kind of fun. What was the most prepared person you assisted like, and how did their life touch yours?
There were a number of them actually, but to a large degree, it was women more so than men who I found to be more prepared in this way. One of the things that I had witnessed a number of times when I was involved with estate planning seminars that we would put on in communities, where we would invite a lawyer to speak and and someone from the financial industry, and sometimes that was myself because I am a financial planner. But we had 3 or 4 people speak to an audience about the importance of planning ahead, and quite often the vast majority of people in the audience were female, and it seemed that in some cases, the men would reluctantly come. Perhaps they were pulled by the ear by their wife, wanting them to hear this message to be better prepared. But as I joke about in my book to a small degree, I talk about how women are much more inclined to talk about their feelings and plan for these sorts of things. Many men, to a large degree, would rather not talk about their feelings and would and maybe it's the stubborn mentality perhaps of that some of us men have. I don't know, but that was a trend that I had seen.
For sure, that makes sense. I guess that's a great answer. And from your book, I was really surprised by the number, before I hand it to Gail, of that there was $900 million that's locked away in accounts that cannot be accessed because people don't create their wills and leave their instructions. So I found that to be mind blowing.
Right, and that particular figure, Natalie, is actually, if I recall correctly, based on Canadian bank accounts, and those amounts can be accessed actually, but a lot of people don't even know about it. And over the years and decades of a lifetime, when people may set up a bank account here or there and then move and then never go back and close the account, what it's pertaining to are simply the vast amounts of money that are sitting dormant in unclaimed bank accounts.
It's incredible. So great job in adding that little that fact. Gail, I'm going to hand it to you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Natalie. So, hey, Greg, welcome aboard. I hope you're having a good time. I know I am. So, I also am an author of multiple books. Some have been international bestsellers as well. And I've been on this author's journey, so I know exactly how you feel in the hot seat. Don't worry, relax. I am kind of in the healing field, but I'm the healer of the soul. So I work with people who are already healers and have hit the tough times and they can't get out of it, and they don't understand why their tools are no longer working. So I walk beside them during their journey of coming out of the darkness that they find themselves in. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm like trying to figure out which one I want to ask you. So I hope we get a couple of rounds in here. So you mentioned social identity in your book, that when someone passes on, their social identity continues. And that kind of fascinated me. So, can you explain to us what the heck is a social identity? Why does it continue? And what are some of the ups and downs and concerns around that?
Well, what I was referring to in the book, Gail, was the fact that when people die, there's, in my mind, there's a transition point between when that person is no longer seen as the person that they were, that they had always been, and the transition to that person then becoming basically a body, a in a sense. It's kind of hard to explain and put words around, but the social identity that I was referring to in the book at that particular point has to do with other living people around that person, how they view the situation differently after the death. And I get it. It's an incredibly difficult, emotionally charged, intense time in people's lives, and I've seen it. I've been on the front lines of the funeral industry and worked actually as a supervisor at one of the largest mortuaries in Canada, and I had seen it many, many times as I was involved with the police and the forensics department, and having to work in these various situations where people had died suddenly or through accidents, and all kinds of situations that people would perhaps not even would have a hard time getting their mind around.
Hmm.
But that aspect of social identity I was referring to when that transition takes place.
Oh, that does really help a little bit. I just want to say hello, Coach Eve. We do know you're here. Coach Eve says hello to everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I know that Sinette is still tied up with the baby, so we'll bounce right over to Krista Rose.
So I'm actually okay.
You good? You good? Okay,
I'm
good.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry,
So
Krista.
So, my beautiful viewers, I know you know I am a voice amplifier. So, I am truly so blessed that we have this amazing platform. So, thank you, first of all, to E360 TV, the platform in California, for allowing us to be able to broadcast. So, my question is, my beautiful Craig, what do you find the biggest misconception people have about planning for their deaths?
There's a number of misconceptions and a number of fears, actually, from what I have found in the funeral and the financial planning industry. And as I stress in the book, I think the major two or three of them are superstition that plays into this. I've come across a lot of people and had a number of people tell me that they are uncomfortable talking about these sorts of things because they feel if they set up a will, as an example, it could lead to their death sooner. And that's really not the case. It's not the case at all. As Gail Rubin says, and she is a prominent death doula out of the States who is miles ahead of my message, she says, I see your glasses, Gail, but here's another interesting point. One of her interesting taglines is this: talking about sex will not make anyone pregnant, and talking about death will not make anyone dead. Is that a good one or what? But it's very true. I think superstition plays into this, and a lot of people don't know where to turn. And I understand that people's situations can be so dramatically different, and various professionals may be needed to sort out the various issues of their estate transition and legacy planning and so on. But there are many people out there willing and eager to help them. But more people need to know at least the fundamentals of how this area works. And that's the whole idea of my book.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Krista?
That's fantastic. And, I'm going to tell you personally how your book literally could have changed my life, but has changed my life now. So years ago, I lost my husband tragically to leukemia. We only knew for 2 weeks. We were young. We didn't have mortgage insurance. We didn't have a will. We didn't have any of this stuff. So when he passed away, we had a little, I had a little boy, and I was completely lost. What were his wishes? Would he want to be on a machine, or not? So your book would have been just the value of the book would have been tremendous at that time. And now, having said that, after reading your book, I'm making sure I have all those checks. And I've gone through it twice because I have some of the stuff done, but wow, you've really blown my mind and you really went deep. So the information that you have is literally going to change people's lives and better it for better it for many people and their relatives. And I wanted to say, Coach Eve is saying this is very helpful information. But I wanted to ask you, so you talked and you brought in a personal touch, which I really loved, about your mother, your 82-year-old mother. Can you tell me a little bit why you decided to bring in the personal, information and, maybe that journey?
Well, I wanted to be authentic and transparent, and it's just so ironic that as I was creating the manuscript with all the beta testers that I had recruited from my target market to provide me feedback, and then my mom flatlining in front of me and then dying the next morning after breaking her hip, and even the brain tumor diagnosis 2 months after I published the darn book. I just felt that even though I didn't have that diagnosis within the book because it was already published, I felt compelled to share it on social media. And my publishing coach had always stressed that I should try new things as a new author. So I did that, and I posted the one video on social media shortly after I had told my wife that I had a brain tumor, not knowing if it was cancerous or not, and it went viral. It has been viewed now over 1.7 million times.
That is fantastic. And what has been some of the feedback?
Well, the same sort of comments, Krista, as you have mentioned, that these sorts of conversations need to be happening sooner. And it's proven in the financial planning industry. I have seen this so many times. And that's why I have also created a list of questions. I call them the probing legacy questions that I provide free of charge on my website, do not ignore your mortality.com, that anyone can download and use those questions to help get these conversations moving in a more productive way with those that they love.
Wow, that is so generous of you. And yeah, you explained it so well. And I'm so glad that not only did your video go viral, your message went viral. So thank you so much, Greg. Natalie.
Beautiful, Greg. Yeah, that touched me as well, about your mom and also about you. It's life. Just so many great tips in your book that I have a tendency to shy away from this area, and most of us do. But I love what you said about actually framing this as a legacy conversation. I love that word, and I wanted to share something, Greg, that when I was 19, I actually worked in a funeral home. One of my first jobs was selling pre-arrangement, cold calling. And so I couldn't get my paycheck until I made my first sale. And I came to my list, and I'm not kidding you, the people's name was Mr. and Mrs. Death. And I called the number, and she said, and she was an elderly gal, I could tell, and she's like, yes, we want you to come. And so they were my first. I sold them a double cremation package, and she was so happy. And I quit that job. because my boss was a little bit creepy. But it was a beautiful moment, and I could see how relieved she was. So I'm with you on this. I'm with you in just taking care of it, because just like anything, when we just take care of it, the pressure leaves us. So I'm going to ask you this question. You put this in your book, that this could be an opener to people talking to their family. I've been thinking about my life and how I want to be remembered, and asking that your family or whomever, how will you remember me?
Yes. Yeah, it's a powerful question that I've heard in the industry for years. And that's why I wish, if I, and I'll probably redo the book or come out with a second edition at some point, but that's why I wanted to come up with these questions, to sincerely help people get these conversations moving in the right direction. But what I have found over the last 2 years since I published this book is I've distilled my core message down to this. And I think it's the most inspiring message I can really come up with. End of life planning helps reduce the stress of aging. It leaves survivors more financially and emotionally resilient. It leaves them more likely to get along and less likely to contest final wishes. The process naturally results in more meaningful legacies. It often helps charities who desperately need the money. It takes immense pressure off the courts from otherwise having to deal with so many unorganized estates. And cumulatively, it all helps the economy. It's a massive win for everyone. And I just wish more people would lean into this. So why don't they?
So, Natalie, are you on mute?
Yeah, I just got off. Why don't they? Well, that's a question. That question that you posed there, I think making it like almost like planning a party or the
Yeah.
Last Supper kind of thing. And make like my great uncle, they were foster parents, and they had adopted 40 plus foster kids over his lifetime. He just served the community. His funeral was the biggest party. It was a celebration of life. It was the most uplifting experience. So it's almost like I could see it as a motivator. Like I'm feeling motivated to actually live my life in such a way that people would be celebrating me when I die.
Yes.
So, just great, Greg. Thank you for answering my question
Oh,
and
you're
allowing me.
welcome. You're welcome. And actually, it has me thinking about the occasional comments that I've heard about some people actually organizing a funeral type event before they die. And that's another creative idea.
So let's talk about quantum entanglement, because what I wrote down was I wanted to tell the story of my ex-husband's grandmother, Nani. Nani stipulated that people were from Italy, old Italian. So what do you think? Pasta and food. Pasta and food. There has to be a party. There has to be food. It was like a wedding. It was such a celebration of her life, such a celebration of her legacy, her offsprings, right? All of them together, just having a great time. So I just thought that that was perfect for her.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect for her, because her life was all around money. You kind of touched on what my next question or statement question thought is about. And you mentioned that usually it's all about money, and maybe what it should be is about harmony. And I'd like to talk a little bit about harmony. And the reason being is I feel that that should be part of the conversation, because of the experiences that I've seen at funeral homes where that wasn't. And people, the guilt, the shame, the anger, all of that stuff comes out. So talk a little bit about what you mean by harmony and how that can help in the process.
End of life conversations, when they happen authentically and transparently, can often pull family members together. And there's a lot of dysfunction going on out there in families. I see it in my inner circle, and I've seen many families, as I'm sure almost all of us can attest to, that there's a lot of dysfunction going on and people not talking to other members of their family, etc. But these types of deep conversations, as I said, can pull families closer together, because when we talk with others about truly what they want their legacy to be and what their life has meant, and those types of very intimate conversations, how could they not pull families closer together? And I guess those family members that may not want to talk about these things or be a part of it, maybe their minds could never be changed. But I would think the vast majority of people that are open to having these conversations, and the key is to have them when minds are clear and time is plentiful, that's when they can be more productive and we can actually find out truly what people want to have happen.
You know, I've always felt that celebrations of life, funerals, are about the living and not the dead. The dead have passed on, and it's to help the living deal with what is left for them. And so the conversations, when I read that, I was thinking of, can the healing be done before the death? Because after the death, there is no healing unless you go down the spiritual path. And it can be pretty devastating. So that is a very important part of your book. And if you rewrite it, please do elaborate on that, because it is incredibly important. Thank you.
Yes.
And Sanette.
Thank you so much, my beautiful Craig. With your statement you bestow on all of us through Natalie's question, you've answered 3 of my questions. So I had to run down. I have 15 questions for you. So I had to run down what will be the next question.
Yeah.
What was writing this book taught you about your own life and mortality?
Well, it confirmed in my mind, and actually, Sanette, that I was so grateful that I had my affairs in order. When when the general physician told me that the MRI that had been done on my skull, it was indicating a brain tumor, he didn't know if it was cancerous or not. And he was waiting for a call from an ear, nose, and throat specialist to get me in for an appointment right away. And by the time they got home, his secretary was already calling me, urgently asking me to come in a day or two later. So I assumed it was cancerous. And having that burden on my mind, having to deal with that, was incredibly difficult. I was in shock. But as I say in the book, it's I can't imagine people, and I've met them, and I'm sure many of you have too, not having your final affairs in order, and then all of a sudden having a major health issue to deal with, and then trying to scramble to get your affairs in order with that health issue on your plate would be incredibly difficult.
That is so true, my beautiful Craig. And it also let me think, because between my husband and myself, we have talked, but my children, we didn't talk about it with the children. Or we mention here and there, but there's no official, like, I want to have a party. Walking on Sunshine will be the song that will play. I've got it, but I didn't write it down. So there was your whole book was for me an eye opener to say, Sinette, you have to get your act together and put everything on paper. We have the will, we have all that, but we don't have all the steps that is in your book. So, my beautiful viewers, please look down below in the show notes. Greg's book, to connect to his, to buy the link to buy his book, the link to go to his website is all in the show notes. If you want to connect with him, please do so. And then with any of our beautiful co-hosts, all the details is down below. Or over to you, my beautiful Krista.
Well, it always happens that people will ask questions, and often it's kind of like we steal each other's questions. But although this may have been brought up, I really do want to highlight it. So, you talked about death doulas, and it's interesting how, for while giving birth, it's well known that there can be a doula, present to help you go through the journey, the transition, the pain, the pleasure of having your baby. But it's, for me anyway, it's fairly new, a new term to have a death doula. So I really wanted to kind of hit on that because I'm sure so many people watching this are saying, what? And maybe they have it in themselves to be a death doula. Maybe that's something that they naturally want to gravitate to, but don't actually understand that it's a real thing. So I really wanted to highlight that. Can you explain anything more about that?
Yes, yes, I can. A death doula is really a helper, similar, as you said, to a birth doula. And I've acted as a hospice volunteer and very much enjoyed it. And I write about this within my book. There is such a vast, immense need for people to help in these types of situations. And I totally understand that it's sensitive, it can be difficult, but many people like myself who have helped out at a hospice have found it very uh, very enlightening and heartwarming to help people out at such a difficult time. The major mandate of hospice, and I believe this to be the case universally, is that no one should die alone. And I think that that is such a compelling thought and uplifting statement, and it seems to be so relevant in today's world. And there are so many people who do not have family there to support them at such a time, and that's why many people who are in that type of situation are who are dying quite often will end up being involved with a hospice, and the environment is so supportive and comforting. I've met many people who have died in that type of situation, and it's really, but I think, a perfect place to spend your last chapter.
Yeah. Oh, that is beautiful. And you know what? I want to take this one step further. So I worked in long-term care, and there's been oftentimes people were transitioning and passing, and that we're waiting for their families to come. So I would often sit with them and stay with them. And sometimes they passed before, the families got there, and but they were so grateful. But for me, it felt like a privilege. So I want to take it one step further to, put out there maybe some ideas, not just hospice, long-term care, hospitals, anywhere really, to bring this in to almost the norm. So thank you, Greg, for really highlighting this because I think that's such an important part that we can all encompass. So thank you, Natalie.
Beautiful, beautiful, Krista. So, from what we've been speaking about the communication aspect, Greg, and that chapter, and you and Gail were talking about the conversation and how truthfulness, how the act of being truthful, a lot of people keep their wills secret. They want to pass on the executor, keep who the executor is secret. I've heard so many nightmares of older women or whomever, somebody passing away, not knowing computer passwords, not knowing any of these things. So how truthfulness brings intimacy. And even as a therapist, I'm thinking, how could I actually engage in this realm of service to assist families in having these discussions as a mediator? So what's highlighting in my mind is the message, rest in peace. Maybe that's your next book, Rest in Peace. Because you've taken care of stuff, you can rest in peace before. throughout um, throughout
Yes.
the last chapters of your life. Now, this is my husband's question because we've been talking. He said, he said he's very logical. He said, what are three simple, low cost steps for a person to get started?
Well,
Just it doesn't have to be super huge. It could just be, starting.
okay. Well,
Okay.
this is a biased answer, but this is precisely why I wrote the book. And the ebook and audiobook are less than $10 Canadian, I believe. It's very inexpensive, but it summarizes all this information that inspires people to move forward with this and have the conversations with their family and pull out their will and read the darn thing. And if they don't have a will, to know why they should certainly be getting one. And it also talks about, as you know, in going through the book, ladies, that I also bring up the fact that, yes, people can set up a will online if they wish for very little money, but there are serious cautions with that as well. But that would be the very first step, Natalie, that I would suggest as a low cost option that would open up all kinds of information. The next one would be speaking with your family about what you want to have happen.
Fair enough. That's good. I mean, that's the natural. Your book is just chock full of information, very clear and brief. So, lastly, do you? I can see that. I can see you doing this. Do you coach people as kind of a hand-holding coach through this emotional process? I mean, it's your book. You could coach them and hold their hand because that's what I would want.
Right. Well, I'm open to that. At this point, Natalie, I have not done I've done a bit of one-on-one coaching in the past, but since I have published the book 2 years ago, I have been strictly focusing on my publishing coach's advice in completing as many podcast and radio interviews as I can to share my message, because that's ultimately what motivates people to buy the book or ebook or audiobook that I have. And I'm also reaching out to corporations who have a similar target market and speaking to them about my message and leveraging it at a higher level.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Greg.
Guess it's up to me. So you have a section in there about being an executrix. And this hit me like a ton of bricks because I am the executrix for my sister's estate in California. And the reason why is her daughter is a paraplegic. And so the care of that daughter is very key in her will. And I know where her will is, I know where her papers are, but I've never sat down and gone through it with her. I've never had a conversation of, well, what do you mean by this and what do you mean by that? Talk about, so okay, I've got it all written down, but the person who's the executrix is clueless as to what they could run into. I almost had a heart attack when I read that. Talk about some of that stuff.
Yes. That role of an executor for a male or executrix as a person acting as a female can be very challenging because of all the different dynamics that are involved. It's quite often emotional, it's quite often complex. Very often people have never acted in that type of role before, so they're not quite sure of all the duties that they are responsible for. And here in Canada, the bar keeps being raised, and I'm sure this is the case in other countries too. Executors now, if they don't act properly and they cause a mistake that causes the estate to lose money, they can actually be sued. And that's a relatively new risk that executors need to be aware of. And that's why I stress within the book and all of my messaging that people should, again, lean into these conversations while time is plentiful and minds are clear, and learn at least the fundamentals of how it works. far too many people are surprised by the fact that they are in the executor's role after a death, and that is not the time to be surprising people.
Yes, when my father passed, I found out that I was the executrix of his estate and was not prepared for that. But his was not as complex as my sister's is. So, want to talk just a little bit on the class that you suggested, because man, I'm taking that class for sure.
Yes, and I think what you're referring to, Gail, is the personal fiduciary
Yes,
certificate. I
that's part of
mentioned
it.
that in my book. I
Mhm.
think the cost is $39 US. It's a 2 or 3 hour course with a test at the end of it, all online. But it gives anyone and anyone can take this course. It's very helpful for anyone that's going to be acting in the best interest of another person. In other words, acting as a fiduciary. And
Which
someone
I
who
will
is
be.
settling in a state as an executor is a fiduciary. A
Mhm.
financial, someone acting as a power of attorney or looking after a medical directive and helping someone else with their wishes in that way. They also are a fiduciary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much just for that piece alone. Sinette.
Thank you so much, my beautiful girl. So, my beautiful Greg, if I can ask you this question, but if it can be a short answer, because then I will hand over to beautiful Christoph, our speed run. So, you touch on legacy in chapter 4. How do you define a meaningful legacy?
It's how we want to be remembered after we have died. And they say that we're really only remembered as far out as the last person that knew us, as long as they live. But many of us don't have the money to have our name put on a hospital wing, etc. But there are many things that we can do to make it easier for those we love. And I truly do think that end of life planning, being prepared, is one of the greatest gifts of love that we can leave those that we care about most.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. You too, Sanette. It looks like you do too. So it looks like this is a time for the speed round. So what I'll do is I'll say some words that half the people here already stole. So I'm going, I had to quickly come up with new words, and that's okay. That's what we do on live TV. So just answer in a word or two. First thing that pops into your mind. So the first word is mortality.
Longevity,
Mm. Decisions.
speaking with family,
That's good. Power.
money,
Mm. Preparation.
planning in advance when minds are clear.
That's the key point. Extra paparazzi for there. And what was going to be legacy is no longer that, is responsibility.
Being a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. No, I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and I know the viewers have too. So remember, go to the show notes. Your family and friends and loved ones as well.
So, my beautiful ones, that was so fast. Normally, we take 3 minutes to go through that, and it was so fast and concise this time. So, I love it. So, my beautiful Craig, I just want to give one more paparazzi shot out to you, and you can pose and ah. Oh, thank you so much. I wanted to take a photo, and I did with a flash. So we actually have a few more minutes. My beautiful Natalie, do you have a short question that you would love to ask Craig?
Ooh. Well, I have yet to put my will together, but I realize my intellectual property for people who don't have a lot of cash. Something that we want to remember is our intellectual property. Now, The most inspiring thing you experienced as an undertaker.
I experienced many funerals that brought myself and my coworkers to tears, and I've seen and witnessed so many celebrations of glorious lives that have been lived, and to be part of those celebrations and actually just be involved in it and such were in many cases just so heartwarming, and it was such an honor to be a part of it. And on the flip side, I've seen a few where there's been fights too, and they weren't so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I could see how just a life finishing well has been a big part of you being motivated to share this information, because writing a book on this topic had to take a lot of motivation.
It did, and I was really challenged with how do I write a book about something that most people don't want to talk about, and that's why my publishing coach, a dragon for 3 seasons on Dragon's Den, stressed to me that I need to work in some humor into it, and I did that. It's a little dry, but I added some humor.
You did. You did. You had me chuckling. I caught it.
Thank you. Gail, do you have a question for beautiful Craig?
My question is, you kind of hinted at a follow up or a rewrite because other things have come to mind. If you were to do a second book, not a rewrite, what would that look like?
Well, I'm considering a second edition of this book, Gail, to include some things like my brain tumor diagnosis and some other points that I'd like to include in it. More questions about that readers and listeners can use to get these conversations going more effectively at home with those that they love. But I really don't think at this point that I would write a second different book. It would really just be an update to this existing one.
I love it. So it's living and breathing, living and breathing.
I love
Thank
it.
you so much.
I love it. So, my last question to you, my beautiful Craig. If there's one takeaway that you would leave to our beautiful viewers, what will that be?
It's always too soon to talk about death until it's too late. So we should all plan while we can.
That is so deep. That is amazing. My beautiful Craig, thank you so much for your amazingness, and thank you for doing this book, because there is not a lot of books like this. I must just tell you, this was truly amazing. Um, how are you feeling at this moment?
Lucky to be alive.
I'm so happy. And how do you feel about the show, my beautiful Craig?
I greatly appreciate being a guest on your show and meeting all of you. And thank you to Natalie for the introduction. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. My beautiful Crystal, do you have a message for Craig and the beautiful viewers?
Absolutely. So first of all, I wanted to bring up one other thing that we didn't highlight. It was about organ donation. Expressing to your family and loved ones, or putting it in your will is so important. I will say that it's literally has saved one of my best friends' lives. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm just going to read a quick quote because me and Laura always take a quote on. So it says, this is by Stephen Covey. It says, "Thank you for being an organ donor." The quote is, "The need to leave a legacy is our spiritual need to have a sense of meaning, purpose, personal congruence, and contribution." So, yeah, absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure there's many reasons why you put that in the book. Is there any one specific reason?
I wanted to make it clear to everyone that reads or listens to the book that they need to keep it in mind that regardless of one's age, organs or tissue can be donated, and there is such a massive need for this, the donations to take place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, my beautiful Krista and Craig. And Natalie, do you have a message for Craig?
Ah, I'm going to end with something funny. So your light humor was, you said, you're talking about wills, and you said, I have some updating to do. And then you said, just kidding. And I thought, you better be kidding.
I
Yeah,
love
Yeah.
that part.
And by the way, that's true. The part that I mentioned in my book where I was in a car wreck as I was writing the manuscript, it was actually a police officer that hit me and rode off the vehicle that I was driving, and he was charged.
Wow. Wow. Mind blowing. My beautiful guy, the last statement will come from you. Do you have a statement you would love to make to Craig?
I just have to say that, Craig, this was incredibly brave to write this particular book because it could have been a boring, scary disaster. And it is not at all. It is full of so much information. I love your check, 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 check list because I'm like, because I took a copy of all of that and then went through this is what I need to do, this is what I need to do. It is a book that is actionable. And I want to thank you for being brave enough to take on the challenge.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So, my beautiful viewers, get Craig's book. Show notes down below. All the details are there. So, my beautiful Craig, I have an important question for you. Would you love to have a dance with all of us?
Yes, I would.
Oh, thank you. My beautiful viewers, would you love to dance with us? They said yes. They said yes. Yeah. Oops. Here we go. Woo. Woohoo! Here we go.
Walking on sunshine or dancing in the rain. Sprinkle me with fairy dust so I can fly away. Smiling at a moonbeam or squinting in the sun. Sprinkle me with fairy dust and cover
Bye
me
bye,
with
everyone. Bye bye.